Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman Raskin, great to see you, and thanks for all your work in the area that's the subject of the hearing today and for all you do for the great state of Maryland. Just to follow up on that question, isn't it the case that your investigation revealed that the big oil companies themselves knew that producing the massive amount of greenhouse gas emissions that they did would contribute to global climate change?
Yes, they engaged in the science themselves. They were in the very first wave of scientists who were looking at it. They used objective scientific measures and analysis, and they came to the conclusion that the combustion of fossil fuels leads to climate destabilization and global warming. And only later did they come to the kind of rhetoric suggesting that, all science is equal and, we can, throw a dart on the wall and figure out just as well what's happening. That was not their initial take on this problem.
Right. I mean, I think the point is that, we continue to hear voices who deny the science that the oil companies themselves looked at back in the day before they turned to a deliberate strategy of denial, right?
And they continue to use it for their own internal business planning purposes. I mean, you can be certain that they're not fooling around with fake science when it comes to their own business projections and their own plans for the future.
Right. So, look, there's some who argue that the house is on fire, but we shouldn't do anything about it because it's going to keep burning and just eventually burn to the ground. I think most of us recognize that what makes sense for all of us and for humanity is to try to put out the fire before it consumes the entire planet, destroys our economies, and does other damage. So I wanted to ask you about the whole notion of what economists call externalities, because I put forward a proposal. It's right now a white paper called the Polluter Pays Climate Fund legislation. I'm pleased that both the Sheldon White House, the Senator White House, Senator Merkley, and others are part of this effort, which we will eventually convert to legislation. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to put the white paper on the Polluter Pays Climate Fund Act into the record.
Without objection.
So there's going to be a lot of litigation. There already is, both in local jurisdictions, Baltimore City, state of Maryland, using the model of tobacco companies. And I think that those cases should be pursued. But there's also another approach here that's not to the exclusion of those efforts, which is to apply the Superfund model. And essentially the Superfund model was, if you broke it, you pay for it, right? Why should the public be having to pay all the costs of harm that is due to the actions of big oil companies and other major emitters? And the idea behind the Superfund is pretty much the science is clear. In this case, the damage done by greenhouse gas emissions is clear. So there should be a strict liability standard, effectively, a polluter pays standard. You mentioned, for example, the cost just in the city of Annapolis, $4 billion to help, raise the dock, $27 billion over time. That's just one small example. So this proposal would look at the very largest emitters. So we're talking about 25 to 30 of the emitters here in the United States, or anybody who's doing business here in the United States. Could you talk to the importance of pursuing a polluter pays approach?
Well, thank you, Senator Van Hollen. I have not familiarized myself with the details of your proposal, and I would love to check it out. But it certainly sounds like it addresses the major problem, which is what the economists call the tragedy of the commons. I mean, who owns the sky? Who owns the climate? Nobody does. But who uses the climate? Who uses the sky as part of their business model? Big carbon does. And of course, all of us are implicated in it to the extent that we drive cars and use fossil fuels, which we do. But they're the ones who have profited from it and been deeply invested on a long-term basis in it. And yet, they are not asked to pay for either the short term, the medium term, or the long term effects of climate destabilization. So when you say polluter pays, I take it what you're getting at is that the companies that are profiting handsomely from this business model have to pay for the costs associated with it, which is just a basic principle of good public policy. You want the industries that are causing particular social problems to be forced to be held financially accountable for them.
Well, that's exactly right. And as you know, these companies, the biggest companies, have profited greatly off of this. And the concept behind here actually is those who polluted the most should pay the most for cleaning up the damage and harm they've done. And I'm pleased to have worked with an organization I know you're familiar with, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network in developing this proposal. Look forward to working with you. We've got some other House members engaged as well. So thank you for all the work that you've done to bring us to this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Merkley.